Welcome to the Scale with Speed show, where every time, I'm bringing you guys amazing guests, right? These are people out there in the marketplace that are doing it and doing it big. They're motivating people. They're creating recurring revenue. They're inspiring others, and they're making things happen. And today is no different than any other show. I've got my guest on. I'm going to do an intro right now for him. Clint Reese. He is a husband, father of two, author, stand-up comedian. I can't wait for the jokes on this. It's going to be great. Award-winning public speaker, a meme aficionado, and president of the Fort Worth Panther City Toastmasters. He is a professional development trainer, and his mission is simple: to make you better at everything you do in your life and business. Welcome. Thanks for having you on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. I've been looking you up, doing some research in the space, and things I know we're going to get into is we're going to talk about the rubber band ball, which is a really cool story and concept. But then the other things that you're doing that I think are fascinating and I believe in is EQ, right? That emotional. I tell listeners all the time, I feel I have a very high EQ, probably much higher than my IQ. And I think in business, EQ is specifically for entrepreneurs. It's a key component to scale, right, and success.
Sure, absolutely.
The other thing I want to talk about and dive into is you really have kind of mastered. I think how do you call it? Generational training? Is that it?
Generational, yeah. Talking about the 4 different generations in the workplace. I mean, it's a unique time. We haven't had 4 generations all working together for forever. So
yeah. So let's dive into that. I mean, do you want to give a 1 minute, 2 minute intro of who you are, and so the audience kind of knows? I know I did a setup intro, but would love to spend just this is a big mission you have here, right?
Yeah,
to make you better at everything you do in life and business. So Tell us about that.
Well, I've spent a long time in my career. I've worked at all different kinds of companies. I've worked at small companies with great cultures. I've worked at small companies with terrible cultures, and the same for large companies. And it doesn't matter. The size of the organization doesn't exactly change the culture of the business. And the culture comes from the leaders, and the leaders create the culture by having a high EQ. EQ is your foot in the door. That's how you get the job. That's how you're good at the job. And then your EQ is what prepares you to be a leader of people. And when you talk about the different generations in the workplace, I speak a lot about cognitive diversity. And so what you have is all these different generations who were raised completely differently, told a different set of rules, completely taught a different set of values, and now we're all thrown together and told to work on the same projects. And if you do it wrong, then that can create a lot of infighting and different things. But if you do it right and you have a high level of EQ, then you know that having a different set of opinions and a different set of worldviews just makes you better. And if you have the strength and the emotional intelligence enough to have the conversations when you need to, then instead of everybody arguing over, who was a better president, then you can actually get to the heart of the matter and solve some problems.
So I love that. I want the audience to listen, because there's 2 things I think you hit on that are game changing right now in business. 1, a leader has to have the capacity and capable of really understanding emotional intelligence.
Right.
And then the other thing, which, I talk a lot about culture. I actually coach people on culture. I help implement cultures. Is we're faced right now with these generations, and they're so different, right? And if the leader doesn't have that EQ and can kind of have some self-reflection and awareness of his organization and his team, there's no way he or she's going to get that in control.
Right, exactly. I mean, say, I'm technically a millennial.
Right.
Unfortunately, these days, millennial's a dirty word, and I haven't really understood why that is. You always hear from your baby boomers or people that are in the media are talking about how millennials are too sensitive or
Sure.
only care about their phones or these different things, or they want everybody to be equal in the workplace. Well, that's not overly concerning to me. What is concerning to me is why doesn't everybody else want these things?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to be heard and understood and cared for should be something that we all value. And
Right.
it doesn't matter if you are a millennial or a baby boomer or Gen Z, Gen X, it doesn't matter. These things should be valuable to all of us. And a true leader, and one that has a high level of EQ, understands that and knows what it takes to work with each generation and to work with each personality type, because that's dive into a lot as well as different personality types.
So do you, Clint, do you actually go through, because I think it would be fascinating if you shared this data, and I'm sure you have it, also it's you're finding that different generations, there's different motivations.
Yeah.
Right? Like my generation, I feel is in a stereotype that is, which for me would be true. It's been work hard, you're loyal, and it's capitalism, right? And and that's me, man. That's me to a T, right? So, but then you look at more of a millennial generation, right? Not different or right or wrong, and the motivations there, right, or you're starting to see are different. And I think this is fascinating that you're coaching leaders and organizations that just because you're in that generation and you're motivated by money, that doesn't mean that this super rock star that you have right here, their wants and needs may not be capitalistic, right? They may be more work-life balance, flexibility, travel, being heard in the workplace. So, that's what this whole generational thing is, right? I'm assuming you come into organizations and you say, listen, you're a 500, 600,000 person organization. You're able to do a survey cut of data. You say, this is how many sets you have within these different generations. And listen, dude, if you want to freaking grow and you want to get shit done in your organization, he or she, the leader, this is how we have to start operating as a team and be cognizant and aware of these generations. Is that what one of the things that you do? Because if it is, I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. That has a lot to do with it. Now my target, I don't typically try to go after 500, 600,000 employee companies. And the reason I say that is because there is a lot of, you hear people talk about abstraction between like higher level leaders and the people on the front lines.
Yeah.
What happens is when you have 500, 600 people, if you tell somebody you have 20,000 millennials working for you, that number doesn't mean anything to them. It's 20,000 of something as your brain can't even wrap around what that number is.
Right.
On a smaller team at a scale, when it's somebody that you can understand, and I think this plays a little bit into the EQ aspect of it as well. If you have a small team that is needing to grow and that is looking to, as you say, scale with speed, these people need to understand what it takes to do that. And the way you do that is by motivating people, but first you have to understand what their motivations are. Now you have the baby boomers that work hard, get your job done. And so then the generation that they raised, Gen X, was a little bit cynical, but then they went against what their parents said. And so they told their kids, hey, you're special. You can be whatever you want to be. All you have to do is try. And so we kind of grew up with this feeling of let's make a difference. Let's make an impact.
Right.
I hear people say that all the time. But when that gets relayed to people that don't have that same mentality and don't have that same mindset, they hear impact or they hear, I want to make a difference. And it sounds like this hippy dippy bullshit that they don't really understand.
Right.
But what you have to understand is that making that difference and making that impact, that will change the face of your business. Making an impact and making a difference to your customers, to your clients, to anyone that is involved with your business, that is a good thing. And you want people on your team that want to make positive, happy impacts to your clients and your customers. So learning how to motivate that from within people is truly powerful.
Amen. So every, the audience listening to this is people that manage teams,
Mhm.
right? You manage a sales group, you manage a traditional team, you're working within a team, you run a business. I mean, this information, no matter where you are in a career, whether you're a part of the team, managing the team, owning the business, what you're saying is critical to success. So as you have the listeners listening, what is your advice on how to start being aware of, one, if you're in a team, the generations within that team, or two, if you're managing a team, the generations in that team, and what would the advice be to the listeners? Because I think it's something people are not thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So knowing motivations, and people throw around the word motivation all the time, and it would seem like, oh, they're not inspired to do good work, and that's not necessarily what motivation is. Motivation is more a set of internal goals that maybe you don't ever really say out loud, but is something that you hold very dear to you. So like when I talk about millennials wanting to make an impact, or baby boomers wanting to get the job done, make sure that it's done right, and go home at the end of the day. And
so let's do that. Do you have a list? I mean, I think would be helpful to the audience is, why don't we go through all those generations and just high level say, a millennial wants this, a baby boomer wants that. I mean, I think people don't even, and I know that it's not going to be for everyone, but a general statement. Let's just go through the list of 5. What would they be, and what would be the motivations?
Absolutely. So your baby boomers want hard work, and they want return on what they've done, and that they want a clear directive, and they want to do their job.
Okay.
Your Gen X, they're a little more cynical. They want to know a little more detailed version of what the goal looks like. They want a more detailed version of how they're supposed to do their job. And then if they don't delineate from that, they expect the results, and they don't expect for anything to happen. Now, millennials, it starts to get a little bit different. What they want is a long-term goal, short-term goals, and feedback. That's a little bit different than the other generations. Millennials want to know how they're doing all the time. Tell us 2 or 3 times a week, you're doing good, maybe switch this up, change this a little bit. And that's what they want to know, so that they know that they're on the right path. Because again, we've been raised for instant feedback, instant communication, instant gratification.
Yeah.
So we need to know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Your Gen Z that's going to come after the millennials, they're going to be kind of a heightened version of a millennial. They're going to be more emotional, make more emotional decisions. But the beauty of that is they're probably going to have a higher level of EQ than any generation before them. Plus, they'll have the technology to make their emotional intelligence work like actual IQ. And then what they're going to be capable of is pretty exciting.
Well, you know what? That is the best version of that, or probably the only version of that I've actually heard. And I think it's super important, right? I mean, I would even encourage you, after this, we post this and it goes live, you should drop a document or somewhere in the comments that directs it back to your site, and let's give everybody that list. Because I think it's and I think the hardest thing here, Clint, at least as I look at it, for leaders or people in teams, you always tend to gravitate towards comfort.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. So if you're a millennial, there's a high level that you're going to probably manage everyone like millennials, because that's where your comfort is.
Sure.
Or if you're a baby boomer or a Gen X or whatever it is. So I think the list you just did, if you put a little bit more meat on that and gave the audience that, I think it's, it's something great to always have out. It's like, hey, listen, I know I've got these people on my team. Here are the motivations, right? Yeah. I know, I'm sure if, people hire you, you can go in a lot deeper on how to communicate, how to incentivize, all that. But I think that's super valuable, man. And it's so interesting. And you don't hear anybody talking about it. So I really think you're on to something big, because it's a big miss, I believe, in organizations right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, millennials make up over 35% of the workforce, and if the baby boomers and the Gen Xers that are kind of in the leadership roles now just write them off as this generation of people that are too emotional or too sensitive, or got their last place participation ribbons their whole life, then you're missing an opportunity. But then,
okay, so I'm going to challenge you on this, right? Because I'm capitalist, cutthroat, kill them, step on their throat, make it happen, right? So I cannot stand, fucking can't stand it, the participation trophy, right? Like my kids, flag football, whatever it is, you know, I grew up, right? And I believe, and I want this, right? And it's okay to go back and forth. But I believe in order to be successful, you have to freaking know. You got to know what it feels like to lose. You got to know what it takes to work that hard and then feel that defeat. And you got to know what it takes to feel that win, right? When you get that freaking win, man, when you earn that win, it's real. So, you know, what being a millennial, I mean, do you challenge me on that? Do you believe that there's a gray area in there, or are you on board?
I don't. I wish I always prefer a healthy debate, but I have to tell you that I'm completely on board with you. So, I mean, when you look at the research, I mean, if you give somebody a participation ribbon, they know they lost. Like, no, if a kid comes in 10th place out of 9, he knows he lost.
Yeah.
Right? And all you're doing is you make them actually feel worse. I mean, if you look at research, giving them that makes them feel worse. They know they win, but then, like you said, you also take away the work ethic that it takes to win.
Yep.
And the interesting part is the flip side of that we don't tell anybody is that work and IQ, EQ, all that, you can have everything. You can work your ass off. You can do everything to that you're supposed to do the right way and still lose.
I love it. So listen, everybody, I've got a millennial backing me on the participation bullshit trophy. I love it. Hey, let's talk about just because we're throwing the word EQ out and IQ. I mean, I think most people know IQ, and we've been kind of loose with saying EQ.
Sure.
I think it's important for the audience to understand when we're talking EQ, why don't you give the definition of what that is and how it's different than IQ?
Sure. So, I mean, your emotional intelligence is EQ is kind of the shorthand for it. You hear it called EI also. I don't really care either way, don't have a preference. But essentially, you have the two parts of your brain, the rational part of your brain and the emotional part of your brain. And your emotional intelligence is what connects those two. Now, what's interesting is you basically have 3 different factors that work in your life, and it's your rational brain, your personality, and your emotional brain. And what's interesting is that your personality is crystallized and cemented when you're young. Your IQ is crystallized and cemented when you're young, but your emotional intelligence is plastic, and it can adapt and it can change. And so what the message that I think that needs to get out there is when you hear people talking about emotional intelligence, it's not some hippy dippy movement. It's how you propel yourself to the next level. When you see people that are at a high level of leadership, now, if you look at the statistics, you'll see CEOs not very high in EQ. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily manage people anymore. They manage numbers.
Manage the board.
Exactly. They manage the bottom line. Now, then you have leaders that use the bottom line to help lead the people. And those are people that have high levels of EQ. So this is something that you can change. And the biggest key component to it is empathy. And you hear people talk about sympathy and empathy almost like they're the same thing, and they're not. So sympathy is understanding an emotion that a person has and giving that emotion back to them. So in other words, if I go, oh, then you go, oh, then that's sympathy. But empathy is for me to put myself in your shoes. Okay, why does he feel this way? What is it that he has gone through? What are the life events that have led him to feel this way and to think this way? And what can I do to help either change behavior? What can I do to help? These are the kind of questions you have to start asking yourself. And it involves a lot of listening. And we are a generation of talkers.
Yeah.
Not a generation of listeners. And I think if you combine empathy and some true reflective and effective listening, I think, since that is a part of your personality that can expand, can grow, can change, I think you're going to end up with a lot of people that if they practice it and
Right.
they put their best foot forward into it, I mean, you could talk about a paradigm shift if enough people really pay attention.
So one thing I want the audience to take note about that you said that I absolutely love and I say all the time, I don't care if you're in freaking sales, you're managing people, shut up and listen. The buyer is going to tell you what that pain is. The buyer is going to tell you why they're shopping for whatever it is that you have. The employee, the generational employee, whatever generation they fall in, is going to tell you, or I hate saying employee, the team member is going to tell you what they want, why they want it, what's going on. Now, so I'm going to challenge you a little bit. This is where I think this becomes difficult. This is what separates for me good leaders and great leaders. Okay, they have to be freaking execution, and they have to be empathetic. They have to have a high level of EQ. I'll take EQ over IQ any day of the week, because I believe if you have the right balance of EQ and execution, you win. Okay, now it's the balance part here, right? So if you're giving advice to people right now, and so I'm going to challenge you on how does a person that is leading balance empathy and execution. And what I mean by that is, when you're empathetic and you have that high level of EQ, in my mind, there's a time for listening and there's a time for action. There's a time for determining, okay, I've listened enough. No more bullshit and excuses. It's time to get to work. And that's what makes great, in my opinion. It's the balance of understanding how to be empathetic, but also how to drive and create momentum and get people freaking, moving mountains. So sure. How do you balance those two? Because I think you can, if you're too empathetic, your team members can roll you over and take advantage of you.
I would maybe put a little asterisk next to that. I know exactly what you mean, and that if you are trying too hard to relate to someone, that maybe you're worried that you might not have the intestinal fortitude to push them across the next level. But as a leader, that balance is knowing when you truly empathize with that person, it's much easier to push them along, to move them towards the finish line. Because if you know what motivates a person, if you know what a person's goals are, if you can put yourself in their shoes, it doesn't take much to truly motivate them. Now, when you people that are just on the flip side of that, and it's just action, and how can I get the most out of my people, and how can I make them work harder? Well, that might work with a few of the generations, that might work with a few of the different personalities, but empathy works with everyone.
Yeah.
The empathy is empathy and drive is how you do it.
Right.
And it is like you said, you can't be everybody's best friend.
Right.
To empathize with someone is just a skill. That, and you talk about sales. I mean, I've spent my whole career in sales, and to empathize with someone is to know what they need before they know it.
Yeah, totally.
That's easy. I mean, you close the deal just by saying, okay, there it is. That's what you need, and done. Okay. Yeah. It's the same thing with leading, because sales, you're just leading someone to a decision. So leading a team is just leading them the right direction. So if you and can empathize with them, then that's easy. And you don't have to be this hard nosed, we got to drive towards the finish line.
But Clint, where I think the balance is on that, and I agree pretty much with everything you said. And again, I believe the difference between good and great, and to me, there's very few great leaders, is the balance of empathy and execution. And let me crystallize kind of in a use case of what I mean by that. Is a leader in an organization, you have a fiduciary duty, if you're for profit, to grow a company, right? And to grow your profits, and fiduciary take care of everybody that's working for you, et cetera. All right. Now with that, you have to align around a certain goal, a certain culture, certain behaviors, et cetera. that I don't care what freaking generation you're in, that becomes the tribe, North Star, if you will, for an organization. And what becomes challenging, at least I've seen running my own companies, coaching people and things, is that leader, when you crystallize that and you got everybody freaking swimming in the Kool-Aid, man, they got to be swimming in it, right? If you want to win, then when you have these generations, and this is why I think the work that you're doing is fascinating, is the leader, you've set the goalpost, right? It's right there. This is where we're going. And then now you're having to, pseudo tweak based on generations or potential individuals, the motivation, right? That's where it becomes a little bit more challenging, right? Because what Susie is motivated by is different than what Johnny is motivated by. And the empathy comes down at that level. But I think the challenge is when you do empathize, but you're not reaching the potential of the bigger organization, and those individuals aren't carrying their weight, you got to cut them, right? And the balance of that culture, though, is, I would say, and I would argue, 15, 20 years ago, creating culture in the workplace was so much easier because it was just, hey, I'm the guy. This is what we're doing. Everybody better be aligned or else. That's not how it goes anymore. It still is, hey, I'm the guy or the gal. This is how I want things. This is how you got to believe in it. But now there's these different motivations that you have to have empathy for, and you have to motivate these people. And it's hard, right? I mean, I would argue to be a great leader in today's society is a tough, it's a tall order because there's so much things to do, right?
Sure. And you touched on something that's really important there. So when you talk about goals and you talk about the way it used to be versus the way it is now, you set the goalpost back, 20 years ago, it was, there's the goalpost, go. If you don't make it along the way, I'm going to kick you out. And that was kind of the way it went. And it still, to a certain degree, is that way. If you're smart enough,
in my companies, it is for sure.
Well, there's you hear people talk about shared vision. And I do, one of the sessions that I offer, part of the curriculum is goal setting. And so there's a lot of different ways to do it. And as a business, when you talk about shared vision, the ability of a leader to make a goal, a long-term goal, the ability to make that appealing to everyone, that involves empathy, because you have to know why that person wants to get there. Because if they don't want to get there, they're not a fit. If they the value in getting to that goal, they're not a fit. If you can figure out what their motivations are, using your empathy, using your emotional intelligence, and tell them, listen, if you get here, so let's use millennials. They want to make an impact. They want to make a difference. If you get here and you say, listen, this is this huge organization, then once we get there, here's the impact you're going to have made. Here's the difference that you will have made to people along the way and to the company. Now, go towards that.
Yeah.
And there's your motivation right there.
I love it.
Maybe for a baby boomer, it's easy. Maybe it's, all right, here's your goal, go.
Yeah. The thing I love, and I want the audience to gravitate, this word you said, shared, right? I love shared vision. I love it, man. I really do. I talk a lot about, I don't care what generation you're in. We are now in a shared experience environment. And what I mean by that is, think about how you get around in transportation. Uber, I don't even think cab anymore, right? So what I mean by shared experience is, if you call a cab, you call a cab up, hey, pick me up. You have no idea who the driver is, what the car is going to look like, what the rating is, none of those things, right? It's a non-shared experience, right? Until you get into the freaking cab and now you're sharing, you don't know you've want to share, right? Uber has created a shared experience. I can log on, I can pick the time that I want somebody. I can, select, who's closest, furthest. I can choose what type of vehicle I want to be in. I can look at the reviews, and along the way, I can see where they are. So I'm sharing in that experience. And so not only do I think generationally you have to have this idea of shared vision. I think we're all becoming accustomed, whether you're ordering food or whatever, in these shared experiences.
Sure.
So, man, you were. I know we're running out of time here. I freaking love. I could talk hours about this stuff. I'm a cultural nut, right? And I know for the people out there haven't got this book, or get this book. Scale with Speed is all. It's a formula, right? So speed is start with your end game. E is execute with speed. The other E is energize your culture. And then D is dominate your top priorities. So I have a whole section in this book that is about culture. I am a cultural nut. I tell people all the time, I don't care. And first of all, if you only have 2 or 3 people, you don't have a real company yet, right? Real companies have to have people, right? Big company, you have to have people. And people, whether you're selling a service or you're selling a product, that makes the freaking difference.
Yeah.
People make the difference. Culture is key. And, Clint, for everybody out there, I think you can help change organizations, man. I believe that. I think the stuff that you're talking about with empathy, the EQ, right? And then, and I know you do a bunch of other things culturally, but then just the generational piece, that alone, I think every organization, right? So listen, if you guys out there, you're running a team or you run a company, you need this. You need generational, a checklist, a gut check. Talk to us. How do people find you? I would drop your email, your website, your social handles. How do people get in touch with you?
So I keep it very simple. My website is clintreese.com. And that will have links to, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube is where I post a lot of my videos. I'm going to start a podcast soon. I've been kind of tiptoeing around that idea. But I
Don't tiptoe, brother. Commit. Commit. You've got knowledge you got to share. I want you to commit on the show. You're going to do it.
That's my IP, man. I always worry that it's going to get out there, but I'm not,
you got to do it.
Yeah. So that'll be coming up soon. I'll get some advice from you as to how to do it, because I know you've got a great show. But clintreese.com, you can email me, clint@clintreese.com, or you can call me at 817-938-7822.
Great. Well, I appreciate having on the show. It was a great conversation, doing great things, big things. Hopefully people listening today are understanding the value of culture, understanding empathy, how to become feeling out people more than just dictating something, understanding their emotions. It's key, right? And also being cognizant and aware of generations. So listen, as always, this is Judge Graham. I am your host with Scale with Speed. If you're not following me, you need to follow me. Listen, I'm maxed out at 5,000 on my personal. Everybody needs to follow me now at Judge Graham Business on my Facebook. Almost every Friday at noon, I'm going live. I'm doing free coaching, free growth tips, free advice. The best way to get me is judgegraham.com. It's super easy. And again, this book, it's only $19.95. It's almost like free. Huge people, Sharon Lecter, who's written Think and Grow Rich for Women, as well as Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and sold over 30 million books, has done the forward, along with some other huge authors. This is a game-changing book if you're wanting to advance your career, your life, your business, etc. Get the book, make it happen, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.